Iran has shot down an American attack helicopter as the Middle East rapidly changes before our eyes. Iran is currently dictating the terms for peace and interfering in the Israeli-American relationship. Against the explicit wishes of Donald Trump, Israel has carried out attacks on Iran, which had previously attacked Israel with rockets. Trump's desire for peace has given Iran so much leverage that it has now announced a new doctrine, which suggests that direct Iranian attacks on Israel can be expected if Israel carries out military actions against terrorists. All this in this update on the Iran war. Holy smokes! Now save the most at Holy with my code. On the night leading into Monday, there was a direct exchange of blows between Israel and Iran for the first time since the ceasefire at the beginning of April. The whole thing started with an attack by Hezbollah on June 7th on northern Israel with rockets. In response, Israel then attacked Hezbollah infrastructure in Beirut. This had previously been publicly threatened by Netanyahu, already on the 1st. So these attacks were supposed to take place on June 1st, and accordingly, these attacks did take place. Iran then responded with rocket fire on Israel, according to its own statements, targeting an Air Force base. In total, including the later wave, at least 20 Iranian rockets were used. In this first wave, probably about 10 rockets. The Houthis also took part in the attacks with 2 rockets. All rockets were intercepted with American assistance, according to the Israelis. And Trump then said he would call Netanyahu and tell him not to strike back against Iran. Israel didn't care about that, and then carried out 2 waves of attacks. In the first wave, air defense systems were attacked and destroyed. The Israelis report that 9 air defense systems were hit. After this wave of attacks, Iran fired at Israel again, this time with about 10 rockets. And in response, the Israelis launched another wave of attacks, targeting 3 chemical plants that are presumably used for the production of rocket fuel. Iran then announced that it would stop its attacks. But at the same time, it also announced that it would respond more harshly in the future. Israel is also threatening, warning of further attacks on Beirut if necessary. The Iranian spokesman for the Arbitration Council says that these attacks now represent the announcement of a new doctrine. The quote, "This measure sent a clear message. If an attack is carried out on one of the pillars of the axis of resistance, a response will follow beyond geographical borders and fundamentally change the regional balance of power and power dynamics. At the same time, Iran made it clear that any escalation of the conflict or an attack on the country's vital infrastructure would be met with a comprehensive and deterrent response. A response whose reach could include all actors supporting this conflict. So here, supporters are explicitly mentioned, including other nations that, for example, help intercept missiles. In this way, Tehran opened a new chapter in its defense policy, a chapter in which the protection of regional power does not wait for threats, but is pursued through its own initiative and offensive strength. A new doctrine is being announced with great fanfare, which will be offensive, while the Houthis statement seems almost insignificant by comparison. They announced the closure of the Bab al-Mandab for Israeli ships, which is the strait here in the south of the Red Sea. They say it has now been closed to Israeli ships. The whole thing, they are also threatening to attack nations that help Israel. Their ships could also be attacked. The whole thing is probably partly directed against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is now exporting oil via the Red Sea. And we can see it here. When rockets are launched from here towards Israel, they naturally fly over Saudi territory. So if Saudi Arabia were to intervene, if they were to help shoot down the rockets, they would accordingly threaten to attack Saudi ships. And Saudi Arabia is now dependent on this. The oil is brought here into the Red Sea and then travels east through the Bab al-Mandab towards Asia, where it is sold. So Saudi Arabia actually can't afford to have its oil tankers attacked like that. In addition, the US has once again stopped a tanker by force. So the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz continues, as does the blockade in the Gulf of Oman. But now there's also a blockade at Bab al-Mandab, at least a partial one. Of course, this will once again cause oil prices to fluctuate. Moving markets bring risks, but also big opportunities, which you can seize with today's sponsor. We live in times where political and economic developments are impacting the financial markets more and more quickly. Conflicts, interest rate policies, inflation, elections, and shifts in international power. All of this can have immediate effects on stocks and ETFs. That's exactly why I think it's important to have a reliable broker when investing. In my view, my brokerage partner XTB combines ease of use, up-to-date market information, and competitive terms. XTB has been around since 2002. The company is listed on the stock exchange, and already more than 2 million customers worldwide use the platform. XTB is also attractive when it comes to fees. This way, you can invest up to €100,000 per month commission-free in over 9,400 stocks and ETFs. Especially if you want to build wealth in the long term, you shouldn't underestimate fees. Because money that isn't lost to fees stays invested, and if you don't have an investment idea at the moment. Currently, new customers receive 3% interest on uninvested funds for the first 90 days. There is also a special promotion going on right now. New customers receive 15 free legal and general shares worth about €45 with my code Torsten Heinrich. I chose legal and general because the company pays dividends. This way, you can experience firsthand what it's like to receive direct dividends from stocks. Of course, dividends are not guaranteed, and stock prices can fluctuate. Important. Enter the code Heinrich directly when opening your account. Make your first deposit within 7 days and agree to the promotional terms in the mobile app. The promotion only runs until June 30th and is limited to the first 80 new customers. You can find the link and QR code in the description or displayed on the screen. While editing the video, another report came in that would otherwise be left out here. The United States has lost an Apache attack helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. The crew is safe. Trump states that it was Iran who shot down this helicopter. That is quite possible, since the helicopters are not deployed there without reason. On one hand, they are used to combat drones, but on the other hand, they are also used to fire on Iranian speedboats if they operate in the Strait of Hormuz, especially when they are there to lay mines. How far-reaching the consequences will be, and whether it will lead to serious American counterattacks, is still unclear. Because so far, there have also been American airstrikes in response to various Iranian attacks, but always on the premise that Trump wanted to keep things from escalating. Whether it will be different this time is up in the air, but at least it seems unlikely. As I said, this is just an update on the current developments. Strength is also important in diplomacy, because ultimately, what we're seeing right now is a kind of diplomacy that's like a game of chicken. That is, where two sides run toward each other or threaten each other and see who backs down first. Currently, neither side, neither Iran nor the US, is willing to give in enough to satisfy the other side. That means right now the whole discussion is stuck in limbo, with both sides pretending they can hold out longer than the other. However, the Iranian concessions are not really apparent, while on the American side, for example, there seems to be an offer that the Iranians may at least be allowed to continue enriching uranium. That's something Trump categorically ruled out before the war began, and during the course of the war while making demands. The main points of the conflict also remain the recognition of control over the Strait of Hormuz and the reparations, which are being demanded by the Iranian side. It is reported that the minimum is the release of $24 billion that belong to Iran, but are frozen by the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. is talking about compensating the Gulf states for the damages with that money. Of course, that would mean that the money would not be available to Iran. At the same time, Iran wants to force an Israeli withdrawal in Lebanon and thus save Hezbollah, because the government of Lebanon accordingly accuses Iran of wanting to use Lebanon as a bargaining chip. Lebanon now also wants to get rid of Hezbollah, so it's not just Israel anymore. For Iran, it is extremely important to keep Hezbollah. And with that, of course, also the influence in Lebanon, which would be gone if Hezbollah were to lose its weapons, at least its weapons. And at best, it would become a normal party, but no longer a state within a state that, at times, had greater military power than the Lebanese armed forces themselves. That is only possible effectively with U.S. help. That means the U.S. would have to help Iran preserve Hezbollah, because both the Lebanese and the Israelis want to get rid of them, or rather, get rid of Hezbollah's weapons. And that should actually determine the fate of Hezbollah, and that's why Iran is now using the U.S. Trump also says accordingly that he determines how the war is conducted, referring to Netanyahu. He says this in the media, and he says Netanyahu will ultimately have no choice but to accept a peace that Trump negotiates. This is from this article. Trump's remarks about Netanyahu follow the publication of a heated phone call between the two leaders by Axios last week, in which a U.S. official reported that the president said to Netanyahu, "You are damn crazy. Without me, you would be in prison. Now everyone hates you. Because of this thing, everyone hates Israel." At the same time, Trump says he told Netanyahu to be careful, otherwise Israel would have to fight the war alone. Trump also wants to stop Netanyahu, who could trigger the full outbreak, meaning the full resurgence of the war. However, Netanyahu must also respond to Iranian attacks at the same time, because it cannot be allowed that Israel can be attacked without a response. So Iran is currently playing both the US and Israel, sowing discord and trying to use the relationship between the two countries to its own advantage. And here we have to say clearly, Iran is playing to its strengths in an admirable way. Iran is threatening, on the one hand, that the war will break out again, which might please Netanyahu, but definitely not Trump, because Netanyahu naturally wants to defeat both Hezbollah and Iran, or at least he wants to maintain the ability to act against Iran, so that he can launch attacks there whenever he deems it necessary. He was, and we must not forget this, he was stopped by Trump both in June 2025 and in April 2026. In both cases, Trump announced a ceasefire and even stopped the Israeli fighter jets in the air. For Israel, of course, this is about survival. That means, for them, the war is much more important than it is for Trump. If necessary, Israel will also endure a successful Iranian attack if it has to. So if the Iranians get through with their rockets and there are casualties and damage in Israel, that's acceptable for Israel because it's simply a matter of survival. But now Iran is using the US to put more pressure on Israel. This intensifies the tensions between Israel and the US, whose interests are now drifting apart. Israel wants to eliminate the danger. The US wants to get out of the war. At the same time, Iran is establishing a new deterrence posture. In principle, Iran is now threatening, here through an advisor to the supreme spiritual leader, that in the future, any action against Hezbollah should be expected to trigger rocket attacks from Iran. According to the spokesman of the Arbitration Council, it can also be expected that this could extend to the Gaza Strip and Hamas. Hezbollah is currently weakened. Lebanon wants to get rid of them. President Aoun says Lebanon has had enough of Hezbollah. So it's a historic opportunity to defeat Hezbollah, and in the end, even achieve a peace agreement with Lebanon, with a secure northern border for Israel. That would be a great strategic victory for the Israelis. And at the same time, it would eliminate the most important proxy of the Iranians. So Iran and Israel are willing to fight. And Trump wants to end the war at any cost. A resurgence would once again draw the Gulf states in, possibly with even more far-reaching consequences for oil and gas production and potentially further consequences for the U.S. alliance system. A victory in the midterm elections would also become even more distant for the Republicans. So Trump actually can't afford to continue the war. And Iran knows that. So he can use the U.S. against Israel, because Israel is not in a position to fundamentally anger the U.S., since it needs weapons from the U.S. So if Israel carries out military operations that it considers necessary for its protection, Iran can use this and threaten Trump with delaying a peace agreement or even restarting hostilities. Since Trump wants his peace, and peace is unthinkable if Iran is firing at Israel, Iran effectively wants to force an Israeli surrender this way. And this is the really striking part, Iran wants to force the surrender with American help, in Lebanon, and possibly even in the Gaza Strip. So now we have a situation where the militarily weakest of the three powers, namely Iran, is currently setting the political direction and is using the world's #1 superpower to influence Israel's behavior. That's it for today's video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment if you have anything to add. And if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all from my side for now. Thank you very much for your attention and see you soon. Many thanks also to the supporters on YouTube, as well as here on Patreon. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Mahamori and to the Lieutenants Finn, Fünffarb Flecktarn, Jans vom Eck, Uwe de Vreden, Nickname to BP, Carsten Schulz, Tequila 42, Tequila 42 Immelkopf, Pate, Floja, Capri, Bertenment, Lichtshatter, NTX, Malermeister, Nagel, Markus F., Alex Rosenthal, Matt Best, Zigrider, Möter, Janis Gü, Sascha Müller, Cunningham, Eustress. Thank you all very much. Thank you.